Hello and welcome to CWU Live. Today we have a Telecoms and Financial Services members special, and our studio guest is National Officer Alan Eldred. And I'm particularly privileged to be joined by you today because after a 54-year career in the union, you are retiring this week.
Yeah, and it's the first time someone's been privileged to meet me, I might say. So, yes, it is. It's going to be a bit of a wrench, but I'm sure I'll find something else to do, and some mischief to get up to, I'm sure.
Allotments can be good. My dad did that when he retired. It did him very well.
I'm not sure my back would stand up to it.
Fair enough.
The waiting list is probably about 10 years long, but other than that, yes.
I think you're right about the waiting list.
Why not?
We're going to be mining you for stories, insight, analysis from your storied career, both working for BT and, hasn't been called the CWU the whole time, as we'll discuss, but the varied forms that this union has taken over the years. Before that, though, we've got a couple of important pieces of separate news. So it was reported last week that the CWU would hold 2 days of talks with EP Group this week. Those talks have now taken place. They were constructive and will continue over the weekend and into next week. And on next Thursday's show, we'll bring you a full and more detailed report. I know this is an issue that is really concerning a lot of people working for Royal Mail, this potential takeover. So we'll have proper updates for you next week. And offline, the CWU will also be giving senior postal representatives a briefing on the takeover bid and universal service obligation talks that have been taking place that I've just been discussing. And in that regard, a meeting has been called for December the 11th in London. Reps and branches will then immediately cascade information to local units. So every effort being made to keep members always on top of these very important talks. Some more union news as well. We talked recently on the show to Senior Deputy General Secretary Tony Kearns about CWU restructuring. So that's a project aimed at making sure the union is structured in the best possible way to represent and serve our members. So plans on this are continuing at pace. And again, the union is getting branches together, this time on December the 12th, to discuss the next steps. Dave Ward and Tony Kearns, as they've both been clear on this show as well, they really want as much engagement and involvement as possible from all areas of the union. With that in mind, again, we will definitely devote an episode of CW Live to that theme, restructuring in the new year. We want to get your live comments, your live thoughts that you can put to Dave and Tony and other senior representatives. With that all out of the way, let's talk. This is your life, we could say. I'm not going to bring out surprise characters, I'm afraid. It's just going to be me and you.
That's good.
Maybe some surprise characters will appear in the comments. We'll keep a lookout for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've said you've had a role in the union for 54 years.
Yes.
Very impressive. Give us a sort of brief overview, I suppose, and then we'll delve in some details in different elements of it.
I joined BT when I was 16 and went to that was in September. Went to a branch meeting in the November, and there was a letter from union headquarters on why we couldn't have a shorter working week campaign yet. And I stood up and said, why not? If technology doesn't serve the people that are putting it in, repairing it, giving the facilities to customers, and if it doesn't serve wider society, then there's something wrong. And we should go back to that headquarters and tell them, no, if you don't run the campaign, we will. And the branch secretary stood up and said, the only thing wrong with that contribution is I didn't make it. And by the time I walked out of the room, I'd been made interim apprentice rep on a position on the branch committee.
And this was in 1970?
Yes.
How long was the working week back then?
It was 40 hours.
It was 40 hours. And how long is it now? Probably
36 for
36.
my generation of engineers.
There's been some progress, although you could call it glacial progress.
It's been the sort of progress that a capitalist economy allows us to have, is my view of it. But we only get it through fighting for it. We don't. And what the union is about, the telecom side of the union is about to launch another shorter working week campaign. But we'll only get it if we're prepared to fight for it, no matter what the evidence says. And the evidence, there's been trials run across British industry. No matter what the evidence says, they will say no. And so we have to be prepared to fight. And that means we've got to involve our membership in this. They've got to get involved in it because, frankly, in the current environment, it is the only thing that will defend our jobs. And so that's what we're determined to do.
We can talk more about the 4-day week campaign a little bit later. I want to, while we've got you here in your final week, I want to mine more insights and stories from your careered past. We were talking just before we went live about how you ended up, so before you joined the union, I don't know if you joined it straight away, but before you became a rep, obviously you started working for, well, it wasn't called BT then. What was it called?
Well, it was Post Office Telecommunications at the time.
Post Office Telecommunications before they broke them up in the 70s.
And I worked for something called the External Telecommunications Executive, which was the forerunner of BT International.
And you went, your reason for entering that profession has a very sort of 1960s ring to it.
Certainly, a teenager in the 1960s, I wanted to be a recording engineer. So I wrote to every recording company in London. One of them replied, and there was lots of them at the time. One of them replied, Decca Records, I remember it well, and it was a lovely letter, long letter, saying to me, it's not what you know, it's not who you know. No, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's age. It's who you know in this industry. But our advice is study telecommunications because that's the way the industry's going. So I opened the newspaper and there was the advert for Post Office Telecommunications, and I applied and I got the job some way or other, and I've been involved in the industry ever since.
So you trained up to be an engineer in the telecom sector. You get a job for the forerunner to BT, but you never ended up being a record label or a music engineer. What happened?
In the early part of my career, BT were paying more than the recording industry, so it was a no-brainer. For someone that liked to go out and have a drink now and again, it was, let's do this. And it was a lovely atmosphere to work in. I was on 24-hour shift. You built up camaraderie with the people you work with. At the time, it was natural that people joined a union. Absolutely natural. There was no question about it. And people were orientated towards it. What's the union doing about this? They would come over, they would talk to the union and offer ideas to the union. And it's been that strength ever since that sort of keeps you going. When the times get rough, it's the members, nobody else, it's the members. And what they do, what they're doing day in, day out to make things better for themselves, better for their colleagues. And you can only do that through collective strength. And that's why I always look to the members. It's not the union that wins disputes. It's the membership and their solidarity. And that's, we genuinely need, right now, we need to get that rekindled again, because we're in a situation now where workers across every sector of British industry are being attacked. And they're being attacked because the economy is in trouble. And it's not us that runs it, it's the people with the money that run it. And it's us that have to defend ourselves against that. And not just defend ourselves, but go on the attack back. And that's where the Shorter Working Week campaign that we will be running, or my colleagues will be running, we'll start in the new year, and we're confident of success, despite the circumstances that we're currently living through.
And when we're talking about the Royal Mail sort of section of the union on this show, we're often talking about how technology has changed the job and changed the industry. And in that sector, it's particularly email has replaced letters to a large degree, which sort of really changes the business model. Parcels become more important, and there is a bit of a drive from the company bosses to reduce the workforce. I mean, in your sector, the technological transformation came earlier and was probably a lot more fundamental in terms of the absolute transformation of the telecoms industry. So I suppose, could you talk about, what you've observed of when it comes to sort of that technological transition?
I think a lot of the early stages of that happened at a time when the telecom industry was growing anyway. So although the technology in of itself was taking jobs, there was massive growth in telecommunications. And, you know, when I started in the industry, very few people had telephones. I mean, now they've got, you know, home cinemas that are fed by broadband. And so it was very different, and it was a period of growth. So you never actually saw what the impact on jobs was because the sector was growing. The situation we're in now is completely different. Whereas we had job security during the 70s, early 80s, we don't have now. And we don't have it because the companies are still making their profits. We don't have it because they would rather attack our terms and conditions than their profits. That's why they want to maintain their profits by attacking us. And, well, frankly, we ain't having it, and it's got to stop.
And let's talk about, I suppose, some union struggles during your career. So if you could pick out some sort of highs, some lows, some dramatic moments?
I suppose when you talk about struggles, you tend to look towards the periods of industrial action, which on our side of the union has been very rare. I mean, in all those years, I've only been directly involved in industrial action 3 or 4 times, one of them locally and the other 3 nationally. But, you know, and the first one was 1978, which was the Short Working Week campaign.
Oh, so they went on strike for a shorter working week?
Overtime ban, it started as, and then some areas of strike action. And what happened during that time is that we called an overtime ban, and if colleagues that I was working with at the time, would be earning premium rates to work Saturday night, Sunday mornings, and there was one overtime ban where I had 6 of some of the biggest people in London who were all union reps, and we were travelling around to make sure they were out and not inside the buildings.
By only persuasion?
But most of them were out anyway, but there was one building where there was a few of them in, and as soon as we walked through the door, they just went, all right, we're coming.
Right, yeah, once they're reminded.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to use their...
No, we didn't. I mean, I had more trouble getting them all out of the car and wedged in it.
And what was the demand there? So you were working 40 hours. Was it to go down to 36? Or
I think 35-hour week 35. We wanted at the time, you know, it happened in phases, but we got it. And that agreement that we got in 1978 still exists to this day.
Wow.
There's an agreement there that gave us 4-day weeks, 9-day fortnights, still in place now, which just shows the resilience of it, despite at the time being told by what was then a nationalised industry, we can't afford to do this, we can't do it. It was done.
So most people working for BT now have 4 days 1 week, 5 days the next?
Most people now, if they're attacking those as well, the 9-day fortnights, the 4-day weeks, many people do still have that. Lots of people are still on 5-day weeks. The contact centre workers tend to be. We of course, part of my responsibility now, till tomorrow, Sunday anyway, is the 999 operators who do a fantastic job and work 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, serving communities, and some of the nicest and good people that you will ever meet. And, you know, when I meet those people, this is not just something that I would do anyway. You meet those people, it's an obligation to fight for their rights.
And I suppose that was 78, you said, that battle.
Yeah.
Presumably the next big struggle was 1983, when BT, as it was then, it was still nationalised, but they'd separated it from the post office, then it was BT. But BT is the first big industry that the Tories sell off and privatise.
Yeah.
So what reflections do you have from that period and that fight?
Well, that campaign was actually centred on BT International, where we had lots of people. You know, I was working for them at the time, and what BT did during that dispute and in subsequent disputes as well, when we were on strike, they would bus people, go bus people from other areas to come in and do our job. And when those people got to our buildings, and some of them were coming from the Midlands and home counties and everywhere, they'd get to our buildings, they'd say, right, I'll do that work. And I said, no. So they suspended them. And so it went on. And what they actually did was just built the anger, built resistance, built solidarity. And we went on and carried on fighting. Of course, we didn't just have in the AC3 dispute against privatisation, we wasn't just fighting an employer, we was fighting an absolute right-wing government under Thatcher. So, looking back on that, it was still worth doing. It's always worth fighting things that are wrong. Privatisation has not, absolutely not, worked in the interests of working people, and it has not worked in the interests of BT workers either. That is my absolute commitment, and every ounce of me says that wasn't the case. They try to claim that privatisation brings innovation. That industry was already innovative. It was already doing things. And in fact, the union at the time were pushing the service, the telecommunications service, into doing new things. It was us that was saying every home has a phone. In subsequent years, it's us saying every home has a laptop. It was us that involved in campaigns with the GLC of one on every desk, which meant a PC on every desk. And so privatisation is not what politicians will tell you it is. It doesn't breed innovation. It breeds greed.
And from the workers' perspective, I know you were working full-time for the union at that point, right, weren't you?
Yeah.
But how did privatisation change the job?
The employer became more vicious. I mean, there's no two ways about that. It took... I always compare the two and what was happening, because all the time with the subsequent privatisations too, the employers and the government were learning. And that's why it took the real attacks on terms and conditions within BT, took them 30 years to achieve. In the post office, when the post office is privatised, they learn what they need to do quickly. And business is sped up, it's speeded up. There's no two ways about that. But they immediately moved to do some of the things that it took them 25 years to do in BT, not because we were being more resistant or anything like that. They were just speeding that process up because they knew what to do now. But nevertheless, within our industry, we still have the best terms and conditions that are in the industry. And the reason we have that is because this union is here.
And so you said there were three big national strikes. You got the strike for a shorter week in the 70s. You got the strikes against privatisation in the 80s. What's the third one?
It's a pay dispute, and there's been a pay dispute in 87, I think it was, and then another one in 2022, 2023.
Recently,
yeah.
And how did those what did you learn from those?
The last one, I mean, there'll be members, hopefully watching this tonight who remember the last one, and what that dispute done, and it was limited in nature. But what it done, it was doubled the offer. BT made an offer and we doubled it. And the last pay rise of that deal that we done was paid in April of this year. And the percentage increase since that dispute is 9% up to 16%. So, trade unionism works. And I say to everybody out there, get involved, because we need you, but you need us too. And when I talk about the us, too many people say, well, what's the union doing? We have to remember, you are the union. Collectively, we are the union. On our own, we have no strength. Collectively, we have ultimate strength. We're stronger than they are. Always, always remember that.
Let's go to some comments. Stephen Taylor says, Alan leaving, we ain't having it. Would you change your mind in response to that comment? Fancy another 50 years?
No, not really. I'm sort of ready now, I think. or my body is, anyway.
Lawrence McIntosh says, he says, have a great retirement, Alan. But then he's also got a question. Alan, is the campaign for a shorter working week only for BT? He says, we tend to not have any strategy in other parts of the telecoms part. of the union for small companies, to our detriment as members.
I should have made that clear. It's not just BT at all. It's right across the industry and right across where we have members that we will be running this campaign. Inevitably, the campaign will, in the initial stages, I believe, but my colleagues that will be running this after I go this weekend, inevitably it will start and it will be focused, I suspect, initially within areas where we've got the highest CWU membership, which happens to be BT at the moment. But I ask all those members and non-members in the other companies where we have people, get involved. This is coming your way.
Bandafla podcast says, at its height, BT employed 240,000 people down to 80,000 in the UK now. Do you think that was inevitable? Because I suppose one argument would be to say they needed 240,000 people when everyone had a landline, when you needed all these engineers sorting out the wires. Yeah. And now we've moved to mobile telephones and broadband. That sort of reduction in the workforce was inevitable. I mean, what would you say?
We've never denied that technology takes jobs. We've never denied that, which is why we go for shorter working week campaigns and we want shorter hours. So we've never denied that that's what technology does. Whether it's the reduction in staff of that magnitude is inevitable, it's a question that I constantly throw back at BT when they tell me that they're offshoring our work, right? So you have big companies in this country that earn profits in this country, and here we are, BT, offshoring the technical expertise that we do here. And you only have to look at the effects of what happens of that. If you look at the textile industry, where that's how it started. They would offshore work, they would pay people low wages in those offshore locations, and then they would bring it back on the argument that you have to cut your wages because we need to compete with this country abroad. So they run down the terms and conditions through that. And, my appeal to you is this: it's not union officials that defend terms and conditions and pay. It's membership that does that. It's members. We can't do this without you. You may elect us as leaders, but it's you that wins those fights. And that's why you have to get involved, particularly at a time like this. Those attacks are getting worse. They're not getting any better. Over my lifetime, particularly over the last, since Thatcher, basically, things have got worse. And we need members involved in this. We need a trade union that knows what's going on out there. We need people advising us of what's going on. And we need to react when we're under attack, stick together and fight.
And I suppose in terms of building the union, because you say it's about the members, but members do also need reps.
Yep.
You've been a rep and then an officer for a while. How do we get more of you? People saying very kind words in the comments, but how do we get more Alan Eldreds?
It's sort of like, I'll answer it this way. It would screw me up more not to be involved than it does being involved, even though it's really, really hard work at times. I won't shy away from that. There are times when you are making decisions that are difficult, right? But what drives you through is if I was sitting somewhere else and doing nothing about it, that would mess my head up more than anything else.
And when you say difficult decisions, what are you sort of talking about?
Well, when you go into a pay dispute, for example, it's the one we do most common. You go into a pay dispute and you go in there and you have a target. You don't always have a target. You go in there, what you want is fairness. You want a bit of justice. That's all I want. I want our share for our members, and I want that to be the highest it is, obviously. I wouldn't be a union official if I didn't. But sometimes you have the negotiations and you can't get further than this. And you know that you're so close, but you've got to make the decision to accept that, because at that stage it would not work in our interest not to accept it. And they're difficult decisions. Your instincts tells you this is not quite enough, but your head tells you, hold on, now's the time to accept this. We'll be here again. We'll be here again next year.
And then there's sort of two processes, because you've got to make that personal judgment. Is this the right amount?
Yes.
And then you have to put it to the members.
Yes.
And so have you ever sort of struggled? Have you ever had one view that this is all we can get right now, and the membership has had a different view, and you've sort of had to do a bit of to and fro in there? Or
we haven't done it on pay, but we've often done it. Well, not often. There was one particular case when I just got elected to the executive where we'd done a deal on attendance patterns in a particular part of BT, and the members voted against it. And that sort of hurts. I still think it was a good deal. And in fact, just the other day when I was clearing the office out, I threw away that agreement and I went through it. I sat down and I went through it. And it was a really good agreement, I have to say. But some of the branches were advising members to vote against it, and they voted against it. And that hurts a bit. But it's difficult. And the thing that I always say, and I say it to people out there, the hardest job I've ever done has been as a branch secretary, because you are the front line of members' frustration, their anger and everything else. But when you become an executive member and a national officer, almost every decision you take is hard because it's affecting people's lives. We spend most of our waking hours in work. And so that hurts sometimes. It really does play on your mind. And but I would still say I wouldn't want to have done anything else over that last 50 years. It's been rough at times and it's been hard at times, but it screwed me up more to not do it than it did to do it.
It's also a very interesting, like, skill set that you develop, isn't it? Sort of going into negotiations with managers, working out, are they lowballing you? Are you sort of setting an ambition that's too much? You know, sort of, it's a bit like playing poker, I suppose, to some degree. And then you've got to learn, how does the industry work? Because obviously you can't sort of go and negotiate with BT with complete ignorance about their profit margin, because they'll just say, well, we can't do what you're saying because then we'd go bust. So you do have to develop quite a lot of different spheres.
I mean, you are dealing with, I mean, I've learned lots of, well, I've received lots of financial understanding that I wouldn't have learned by being in there. I mean, you're sitting across the table from people that are talking in millions and billions when it comes to their profits, and then telling you on the other hand that they're skint and can't give you a justified pay level. But in terms of what our members do, that skill is in our members. They're the information source for us, not the managers. Our members are far more au fait with the technology, far more au fait with customer service and how to keep customers happy than the management are, because they're having to do it day in, day out. And so that's where the real skill lies. And I just wish that BT, despite the platitudes of our workforce, are our greatest asset, like, you know, prove it. Stop attacking their terms and conditions, you know, and that's where the level of skill really is. It's in our members. It's not in board members who come in, do a few years on lots of money, and then leave. And at the same time, they're board members in BT. They're board members of loads of other companies as well. You know, it's nice if you can get it.
This is a big question from Lawrence again. Alan, are you going to be an active retired member to make the best use of your knowledge? They don't want you to get any. 54 years is not enough.
Yeah, yeah. Give us a call, Lawrence. Give us a call, Lawrence. But there's a beach calling somewhere.
Yeah, I think you've had some time on a beach, I have to say. Someone in the comments was also mentioning that you've always been a great sort of campaigner for international solidarity. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I have been, and it's. I mean, I'm currently until I've had a chat with Dave Ward and we see how long I think there's another meeting in January, Dave. I'd probably like to do that one, but I'm the current executive on the Cuba Solidarity Campaign's executive committee representing the union, and I have to say that, like, the criminal, absolutely criminal American blockade of Cuba is something which, you know, every human being should be fighting against. It's, you know, it's extraterrestrial. You know, I forget the word. Like, I'm a working class boy. I don't know the word, but it's like, how can America impose fines on UK banks for trading with Cuba? And the way they do that is they deny them access. They fine them as well, millions of pounds fines to banks who they say trade with Cuba, not trading at all. And where banks do trade with Cuba, they do. It's sometimes 5 or 6 steps removed. You'll get a high street bank and they've got subsidiaries and subsidiaries and subsidiaries. And if one of those subsidiaries happens to take a credit card from a Cuban, then they're fined. And so they can't trade.
It's economic warfare, right?
It is economic warfare, which causes lots of suffering of those people. This is an island with 11 million people, and they sit 50 miles away from Miami, right? And they have kept that big country at bay for the last 60-odd years. And I think, you know, people should look at them and say, this is a country that's doing the right thing. And what Trump did when he left office, 2 weeks before he left office last time, he put them on a list of state-sponsored of terrorism that increased the sanctions against Cuba. It's just criminal. There is no way that they have ever supported terrorism. They've supported countries that are fighting things like apartheid. Cuba was very, very instrumental.
They sent troops to Angola, didn't they?
Yeah, Angola, and very, very instrumental in supporting the ANC during the fight against apartheid. And, you know, any human being should be looking at that and saying, this is wrong. And we've got another 5 years of Trump.
And your involvement in the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, was that sort of related to your role in the CW, or was that a sort of separate
yes, it was.
thing?
No, it was purely, in fact. I mean, I always knew. I mean, it's like I'd never been to Cuba, but I'd never been to Antarctica either, but I knew it was bloody cold there. And just like I knew that Cuba was doing good things because their education program, after the revolution, the rate of literacy in Cuba soared, because ordinary workers were being told to go around and talk to people, educate people, and they were doing that. It's an example to us all, but I got involved with Cuba Solidarity when I was asked to be the union's representative on their executive.
So what a critic would say is this is the dinosaur old hard left celebrating a dictatorship. How would you respond?
You
must have got that question before.
Well, they would.
Age,
no,
right?
I know the question's sort of coming. Go there and see it, right? Go there and see it. And I would say to you that I've seen dictatorships. Look, every 5 years in this country, we hold a beauty contest and call it an election, right? That's what we do. The decision we take every 5 years is an economic decision. Economics is not a core subject at school. You have to opt for economics. And yet every single one of us makes an economic decision every 5 years. Is that right? That's not right.
So you're a kind of critic of our sort of version of liberal democracy, and you think they might have something else
I'm not. You know, I'm a Democrat. I'll always support democracy, but there's fundamental flaws in ours.
Yeah. And there is the argument as well that sort of the blockade didn't help in terms of any kind of liberalisation that might have existed.
It couldn't, because what they were doing was they wasn't just saying, you can't have the internet, you can't do this. They were trying to protect themselves against the attacks that were coming from 50 miles away.
So we got someone saying, stop the politics, please. Save it. What do you say to people who sort of say, this is a union, it's for its workers, it's for terms and conditions, for retirement packages? Why are they talking about Cuba in the first place?
Every decision we take as a union has got a political aspect to it. If the economy is in trouble, that's through politics. If our reaction to that is an industrial action or an industrial response, it's politics that have put us there. It's the state of the economy now that means we need to fight. I take the point. I mean, yes, let's talk about other things. I've got no problem with that. But do not believe that where the conditions at work are not driven by the politics under which you're living.
So in terms of other topics, one more question is from Elliot Spence. In terms of AI, so artificial intelligence, and the advancement in technology, does the union look at other countries that are more advanced in the telecommunications industry to anticipate domestic changes?
In terms of AI, I mean, AI is really not hit us in the way that it potentially could hit us. We've had our contact centre workers for years and years have had their keystrokes monitored. They've had the time they go to the toilet monitored, all by the machine that sees them log off, sees them log on again, and all of that surveillance that's taken place. So we've lived with what technology can do. AI is different, but I talk to senior managers in lots of companies now, and they say, really, it has not kicked in yet. If we have a look at, I don't believe that there's any country that's that far advanced than any other in terms of AI, particularly in Western democracies with where AI has sort of been developed. So, I mean, Korea as well, South Korea, places like that have had they were ahead of us in technology terms for years. So yeah, we look everywhere. As a union, we're looking everywhere. AI, we have an AI roadmap within the telecom industry that we're developing, and we will be coming back to our members to ask them, because they see it before we see it. But I know in talking to senior managers and senior managers in BT as well, their view is it will hit customer service roles, contact centre roles first, because because of the way it will develop, it'll go first there. But eventually it will develop in technical centres. It will take some of those technical work out of it. But the other thing it will do, which managers often forget, is it will mean that the technical repair work will become higher skilled. Because if the AI can't deal with it and the human has to, that human has got to have those advanced skills. That doesn't, by the way, mean that BT can run away and make all our members managers, because all our members in those technical areas have got those skills. They can use those skills, and it should be them that are using it. So yes, we do look at far further than just ourselves. We're involved with Union Networks International, where we're constantly in dialogue with other countries, trade unionists in other countries. And so we of course take all of that on board, and how we can react to it. I mean, we can react to it with multinational company-wide agreements in some areas, framework agreements, but basically the defence of jobs will always be nationally based. And that's why when we're talking about shorter hours, when we're talking about fighting back, the CWU is talking about our role in the CWU in this country. But of course, in solidarity, we will be talking with trade unionists from all over the world.
And we've got lots of people sort of saying thank you for your service, good luck in your retirement. Let's wrap up by asking you, what is your message to colleagues, to friends, to reps and to members?
It's just, it's almost like begging them, get involved. Like, we can't do this without you. It's not just, you need to get active to defend your jobs. You need to get active to defend your families. And you need to be involved in that. We want people to become reps. We want people to be telling us everything that's going on within their workplaces, because we learn from that too. And it's a real plea that don't join a union as an insurance policy. It is, but don't join it for those reasons. You join it because it's only our collective strength that can defend us against the attacks that are coming from very, very, very rich people.
Alan, thank you so much, not just for this conversation tonight, but for your decades of service and dedication to the union. So it's going to be recognised fully by the union. This isn't the official congratulations on your retirement, a session on CWU Live, but I have really enjoyed it. You've done a very good job by the sounds of it, and I hope you have a long and happy retirement.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, we really appreciate you being here and supporting the union and putting in your questions. Always lovely to read through those. If there is a question you'd like to see sort of answered on a future episode, someone you'd like to see us talk to, or if you just want to share your thoughts, you can comment on these videos. We do look at the comments, or you can email info@cwu.org. For now, we'll see you again next week. Until then, stick with the union.